Biology. Welcome. Introduction to the biology. Biology is a study of life. While biologists have made great strides in discovering things on Earth, there are still many new things to learn. The first fundamental question are: what is life? What does it mean to have life? These inquiries are essential to the discoveries that biologists find every day. With such a vast scope of information, biologists must organize these discoveries that will stand the test of time. We introduce the major topics that biologists study and the theories they use and apply to their work. Science, in general, is knowing. Scientists search for knowledge through inquiry, which is a way to questioning and explaining phenomena that occur in nature. Let's begin by exploring how biologists and researchers use the scientific method in the scientific inquiry of life. Like all sciences, is a social enterprise like politics or the art. The methods of science include careful observation, record keeping, logical and mathematical reasoning, experimentation, and submitting conclusions to the others. Science also require considerable imagination and creativity. A well-designed experiment is commonly described as elegant and beautiful. Like politics, science has considerable practical implications, and some science is dedicated to practical applications such as the prevention of disease. Other science proceed largely motivated by curiosity. Whatever its goal, there is no doubt that science, including biology, has transformed human existence and will continue to do so. Biologists may choose to study Escherichia coli, a bacterium that is normal resident of our digestive tract, but which is also sometimes responsible for disease outbreak. In this micrograph, the bacterium is visualized using scanning electron microscope and digital colorization. The nature of science. What's the nature of science? Biology is a science, but what exactly is science? What does the study of biology share with other scientific disciplines? Science, from the Latin scientia, meaning knowledge, can be defined as knowledge about the natural world. Science is a very specific way of learning or knowing about the world. The history of past 500 years demonstrate that science is a very powerful way of knowing about the world. It's responsible for the technological evolution that has taken place during this time. There are, however, areas of knowledge and human experience that the method of science can't be applied to. This includes such things as answering purely moral questions, atheistic questions, what can be generally categorized as spiritual questions. Science can't investigate these areas because they are outside the alarm of material phenomena, the phenomena of matter and energy, and they can't be observed and measured. Science method is a method of search with defined steps that include experiment and careful observation. The step of the scientific method will be examined in detail later, but one of the most important aspects of this method is the testing of hypotheses. Hypothesis is a suggested explanation for an event which can be tested. Hypotheses or tentative explanation are generally produced with the context of scientific theory. Scientific theory is generally accepted through test and confirmed explanation for set of observation or phenomena. Scientific theory is the foundation of scientific knowledge. In addition, in many scientific disciplines, so in biology, there are scientific laws, often expressed in mathematical formulas, like in physics, which describe how elements of nature will behave under certain specific conditions. There is not an evolution of hypotheses or theories to laws as if they represent some increase in certainty about the world. Hypotheses are the day-to-day material that scientists work with, and they are developed within the context of theories. Laws are concise descriptions of parts of the world that are amenable to formulaic or mathematical description. Natural science. What would you expect to see in a museum of natural science? Frogs, plants, dinosaurs, skeletons exhibit about how the brain functions, a planetarium, games, and minerals, or maybe all of the above. Science includes such diverse fields as astronomy, biology, computer science, geology, physics, chemistry, and mathematics. However, these fields of science related to the physics world and its phenomena and processes are considerable natural science. Thus, a museum of natural science might contain any of items listed above. There is no complete agreement when it comes to define what the natural science include. For some experts, the natural sciences are astronomy, biology, chemistry, science, and physics. Other scholars choose to divide natural science into life sciences, which study living things and include biology, and physical science, which study non-living matter and include astronomy, physics, and chemistry. Some disciplines, such as biophysics and biochemistry, build on two sciences and are interdisciplinary. Scientific inquiry. One thing is common to all forms of science: an ultimate goal to know. Curiosity and inquiry are the driving force for the development of science. Scientists seek to understand the world and the way it operates. Two methods of logical thinking are used: inductive reasoning and deductive reasoning. Inductive reasoning is a form of logical thinking that uses related observation to arrive at a general conclusion. This type of reasoning is common in descriptive science. A life scientist, such as biologists, make observations and record them. These data can be qualitative, descriptive, or quantitative, consisting of numbers, and the raw data can be supplemented with drawing, pictures, photos, videos. From many observations, the scientist can infer conclusions, inductions based on evidence. Inductive reasoning involves formulating generalization inferred from careful observation and analysis of large amount of data. Brain studies often work this way. Many brains are observed while people are doing a task. The part of the brain that light up indicating activity is then demonstrated to be the part controlling the response to that task. Deductive reasoning. Deduction is the type of logic used in hypothesis-based science. In deductive reasoning, the pattern of thinking moves in opposite direction as compared to inductive reasoning. Deductive reasoning is a form of logical thinking that uses general principles or rules to predict scientific results. From those general principles, a scientist can deduce and predict the scientific result that would be valid as long as the general principles are valid. For example, a prediction would be that if the climate is becoming warmer in a region, the distribution of plants and animals should change. Comparisons have been made between distributions in the past and the present, and the many changes that have been found are consistent with warming climate. Finding the change in distribution is evidence that the climate change conclusion is a valid one. Both types of logical thinking are related to the two main pathways of scientific study: descriptive science and hypothesis-based. Descriptive or discovery science aims to observe, explore, discover, while hypothesis-based science begins with a specific question or a problem or a potential answer or solution that can be tested. The boundary between these two forms of study is often blurred because most scientific endeavors combine both approaches. Observation leads to question, question leads to forming a hypothesis as a possible answer to those questions, and then the hypothesis is tested. Thus, descriptive science and hypothesis-based science are in continuous dialogue. Hypothesis testing. Biologists study the living world by posing questions about it and seeking science-based response. This approach is common to other science as well as is often referred to as the scientific method. The scientific method used even in ancient times, but it was first documented by England Sir Francis Bacon, who lived between 1561 to 1626, who set up inductive method for scientific inquiry. The scientific method is not exclusively used by biologists, but can be applied to almost anything as logical problem-solving method. The scientific process typically starts with observation of a problem to be solved that leads to a question. Why is the classroom so warm? Let's think about a simple problem that starts with an observation and apply the scientific method to solve the problem. One Monday morning, a student arrived at the class and quickly discovered that the classroom is too warm. That is an observation that also describes a problem. The classroom is too warm. The student then asked the question, why is the classroom so warm? Recall that hypothesis is a suggested explanation that can be tested to solve a problem. Several hypotheses may be proposed. For example, one hypothesis might be the classroom is warm because no one turned on the air conditioning, but there could be other response to the question, and therefore other hypotheses may be proposed. A second hypothesis might be classroom is warm because there is power failure, also the air conditioning doesn't work. Once a hypothesis has been selected, a prediction may be made. A prediction is similar to hypothesis, but it typically has the format of then, if, then. For example, the prediction for the first hypothesis might be if the student turns on the air conditioning, then the classroom will not longer be too warm. A hypothesis must be testable to ensure that it's valid. For example, a hypothesis that depends on that peer think is not testable because it can never be known what a peer thinks. It should also be falsifiable, meaning that it can be disproven by experimental results. An example of an unfalsifiable hypothesis, potential birth of Venus in beautiful. There is no experiment that might show this statement to be false. To test a hypothesis, a researcher will conduct one or more experiments designed to eliminate one or more of the hypotheses. This important hypothesis can be disproven, eliminated, but can never be proven. Science doesn't deal in proofs like mathematics. If an experiment fails to disprove hypothesis, then we find support for the explanation. But it's not to say that down the road a better explanation will not be found, or more carefully designed experiment will be found to falsify the hypothesis. Each experiment will have one or more variables and one or more controls. A variable is any part of the experiment that can vary and change during the experiment. A control is a part of the experiment that doesn't change. Look for the variable and controls in the experiment that follows. As a simple example, an experiment might be conducted to test the hypothesis that phosphate limits the growth of algae in freshwater ponds. A series of artificial ponds are filled with water, and half of them are treated by adding phosphate each week, while the other half are treated by adding a salt that is known not to be used by algae. The variable there is phosphate or lack of phosphate. The experiment or treatment cases are the bonds with added phosphate, and the control bonds are those with sometimes inert added as the salt. Just adding something is also controlled against the possibility that adding extra matter to the bond has an effect. If the treated bonds show less growth of algae, then we have found support for our hypothesis. If they don't, then we reject our hypothesis. Be aware that rejecting one hypothesis doesn't determine whether or not the other hypothesis can be accepted. It simply eliminates one hypothesis that is not valid. Using the scientific method, the hypotheses that are inconsistent with experimental data are rejected. In recent years, new approach of testing hypotheses has developed as a result of an exponential growth of data deposited in various databases. Using computer algorithm and static analysis of data in database, a new field of so-called data research, also referred as Asilico research, provide new methods to data analysis and their interpretation. This will increase demand for specialists in both biology and computer science and the promising career opportunity. Here, the steps of hypothesis: make an observation, ask a question, form a hypothesis that answer the question, make a prediction based on the hypothesis, do an experiment to test the prediction, analyze the result, the answer for not supported or supported, report the result, try again. In the example below, the scientific method is used to solve an everyday problem, which part in the example below is hypothesis, which is a prediction based on the result of experiment. Is the hypothesis supported? If it's not supported, propose some alternative hypothesis. My toaster doesn't toast my bread. Why doesn't my toaster work? There is something wrong with the electrical outlet. If something is wrong with the outlet, my coffee maker also will not work. Then plugged into it. I plugged my coffee maker into the outlet. My coffee maker works. In practice, the scientific method is not as rigid and structured as it might at first appear. Sometimes an experiment leads to conclusions that favor a change in approach. Often experiments bring entirely new scientific questions to the puzzle. Many times science doesn't operate in a linear fashion. Instead, scientists continually draw inference and make generalization, finding pattern as their research proceeds. Scientific reasoning is more complex than the scientific method alone suggests. Basic and applied science. The scientific community has been debating for the last few decades about the value of different types of science. Is it valuable to pursue science for the sake of simply gaining knowledge, or does scientific knowledge only have worth if we can apply it to solving, say, a specific problem or bettering our lives? This question focuses on the difference between two types of science, basic science and applied science. Basic science or pure science seeks to expand knowledge regardless of the short-term application of that knowledge. It's not focused on developing a product or a service of immediate public or commercial value. The immediate goal of basic science is knowledge for knowledge's sake, though this doesn't mean that in the end it may not result in an application, but we seek knowledge. In contrast, applied science or technology aims to use science to solve real-world problems, making it possible, for example, to improve a crop yield, find a cure for a particular disease, or save animals threatened by natural disaster. In applied science, the problem is usually defined for the researcher. Some individuals may perceive applied science as useful and the basic science as useless. A question these people might pose to a scientist advocating the knowledge acquisition would be, what for? A careful look at the history of science, however, reveals that basic knowledge has resulted in many remarkable applications of great value. Many scientists think that basic understanding of science is necessary before an application is developed. Therefore, applied science relies on the results generated through basic science. Other scientists think that it's time to move on from basic science and instead to find a solution to actual problems. Both approaches are valid. It's true that there are problems that demand immediate attention. However, few solutions could be found without the help of the knowledge generated through basic science. One example how basic and applied science can work together to solve practical problems occurred after the discovery of DNA structure lead to an understanding of the molecular mechanism governing DNA application strands of DNA unique in every human are found in our cells, where they provide the instructions necessary for life. During the DNA replication, new copies of DNA are made shortly before a cell divides to form new cells. Understanding the mechanisms of DNA replication enable scientists to develop laboratory techniques that are now used to identify genetic diseases, pinpoint individuals who were at a crime scene, and determine paternity. Without basic science, it's unlikely that applied science could exist. Another example of link between basic and applied research in Human Genome Project is the Human Genome Project, a study in which each human chromosome was analyzed and mapped to determine the precise sequence of DNA subunits and the exact location of each gene. The gene is the basic unit of heredity, represented by a specific DNA segment that the code for functional molecule. Other mechanisms have also been studied as part of this project to gain better understanding of human chromosome. The Human Genome Project relied on basic research carried out with non-human organisms and later with the human genome. An important end goal eventually became using the data for applied research seeking cure for genetically related disease. While research efforts in both basic science and applied science are usually carefully planned, it's important to note that some discoveries are made by serendipity, that is, by means of fortunate accident or lucky surprise. Penicillin was discovered when biologist Alexander Fleming accidentally left a petri dishes of Staphylococcus bacteria open. An unwanted mold grew, killing the bacteria. The mold turned out to be penicillin, and a new antibiotic was discovered. Even in the highly organized world of science, luck, when combined with an observant, curious mind, can lead to unexpected breakthrough. Reporting scientific work, whether scientific research is basic science or applied science, scientists must share their findings for other researchers to expand and build upon their discoveries. Communication and collaboration within and between sub-disciplines of science are key to advancement knowledge in science. For this reason, an important aspect of scientists' work is disseminating results and communicating with peers. Scientists can share results by presenting them at a scientific meeting or conferences, but this approach can reach only the limited few who are present. Instead, most scientists present the result in peer-reviewed articles that are published in scientific journals. Peer-reviewed articles are scientific papers that are reviewed, usually anonymous, by scientist colleagues or peers. These colleagues are qualified individuals, often experts in the same research area, who judge whether or not the science work is suitable for publication. The process of peer review helps to ensure that the research described in the scientific paper or grant proposal is original, significantly logical, and true. Grant proposals, which are requests for research funding, are also subject to peer review. Scientists publish their work so their scientists can reproduce their experiment under similar or different conditions to expand on the findings. There are many journals and popular press that use peer review system. A large number of online open access journals with articles available without cost are now available, many of which use rigorous peer review system, but some of which are not. Results of any study published in this forum without peer review are not reliable and should not form the basis for other scientific work. In one exception, journal may also allow researchers to seek personal communication from another researcher about unpublished results which the cited authors permission.